Hi there! Welcome to Pallet University and the next episode in our Real Biologist React series, reacting to the art of the ever so talented Joshua Dunlop. We are getting toward the end of Generation 1 from my count and also his Twitter account here from this tweet from February 4th, so about a week ago today at the time I'm recording this. But there are 25 Pokemon left in Generation 1. And I actually did not know this until looking through the thread on this tweet. But Joshua is only doing the first 151, which, the reason that he gives is very good. He wants to work on his own intellectual property. Fully support, him doing that. Hopefully you also will support him doing that. But we have some really cool Pokemon left to be seen. And also we haven't even reacted to all of these wonderful images that he already has up. So with that, if you can support Joshua in any way, whether it's here on his ArtStation page, whether it's his Twitter, his YouTube, his Instagram, any form of support you can go show Joshua would mean a lot to me personally. So please go do that. And with that, let's actually get into the Pokemon that we are talking about today, some of the more recent additions to his ArtStation page. First one being Lickitung. So occasionally he will put up two different pieces of art, different variations. Sometimes it's like a stylistic variation, and sometimes it's just in a different, the Pokemon in a different pose. So we actually have two to react to for Lickitung today. And then we're also going to talk about Jinx, which is just as horrifying as you probably think it will be. But first, Lickitung. So I've always been, I shouldn't say always, until recently I've been relatively confused about, what is Lickitung? Because for the most part, most of these sort of pink blobby Pokemon are generally mammals, or mammal-like, whether it's, Wigglytuff, Clefable, Chansey, they're all vaguely, mammalian. Even Pokemon like Audino, I think most people would assume is probably some kind of mammal-like Pokemon. But that didn't seem right for Lickitung until kind of recently. I think it was during when I was playing through Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee that I'm like, oh, it's a lizard. Like, duh, how have I not realized that before? But it's a lizard, and that's clearly the take that Joshua took as well. And the most obvious way is the face. Very, very generally, lizards tend to have just a more simple looking skull structure. They actually have a much more complex bone wise skull than mammals do. That's one of the big things with mammals, is that we just dump a bunch of bones in our skull and make the ones that are still there, we just make them bigger to fill in the space left by those ones that are no longer there. So lizards have a more complex series of bones in their skull, but especially if you look at a dog skull compared to a lizard skull, the dog skull you would say probably looks a little more complex. It's got the big sagittal crest sort of in the middle, which is where the big jaw muscles attach. But the face just looks relatively simple and very round, which is not a very mammalian thing. So that just sort of was it's pretty lizard-like. Obviously, after that, the scales kind of give it away. I always really like the different ways that he includes, different patterns of Pokemon into his designs. In general, he tends to make the patterns a little more understated than they are in, the actual Pokemon's design, which in some cases makes sense, in other cases it doesn't. Just because lizards particularly tend to be rather colorful, and based on its tail, which I will talk about in a bit, I think he's primarily sort of modeling this off of a gecko and not a chameleon like you might think with the tongue. But so I'll talk about that when I get to the tail. But I don't know. I think I would have liked the white patterns on the chest and stomach, and even the circles on the knees to be a little more prominent. A little more of a different color, especially the ones on the knees. Just because I feel off the top of my head, I don't know what they would be used for in Lickitung. Ecologically, everything is the color that it is, you know, for like some kind of evolutionary purpose. Pink is actually a very rare color for an animal in the real world to be, at least an adult. I don't know of very many pink lizards. There are some, but they're mostly fossorial, meaning that they like live in like burrows and like mostly in the soil. But for an animal that lives like above ground to be pink like this, I don't personally know of any. But with just how diverse life is, it wouldn't surprise me at all if there was one. But, you know, if it's got these, you know, bands and these circles on its knees, they would serve some kind of purpose, whether it's like individual identification, so that Lickitung can tell each other apart, whether it's some kind of aposematic coloring, which basically is when dangerous animals are brightly colored to let you know that they're dangerous. For example, like coral snakes, some of the most venomous snakes in the world, they're the, you know, red, white, and red, yellow, and black bands. Very brightly colored. Several other like venomous snakes are very brightly colored, like mangrove snakes have alternating like lime green or highlighter yellow is probably a better color description of it, like a highlighter yellow and then black bands just alternating all the way down its body to let you know, hey, I am a danger noodle, not just a nope rope. I'm not just going to wig you out. I'm going to, you know, if I bite you, very bad things will happen. So that might be what the bands are for, because I'm pretty sure some of Lickitung's Pokédex entries mention that like its saliva has like a paralytic agent in it, or like some kind of toxin that makes so you can't move, which also would make sense for, you know, how it gets food if it was a predator. Although, as we'll see, he draws it as an herbivore. Realistically, it's probably an omnivore, which don't tend to be venomous. But there's, I guess, not really a great sample size for it. You know, I don't know of any like herbivorous snakes. I don't believe that those exist. I'm fairly confident in saying that. And then the only two major like venomous lizards that I'm aware of, I guess three, are the Gila monster, the beaded lizard, and the Komodo dragon, and all of them are definitely carnivorous. Like, I don't even think they're omnivorous. I think they're just strictly carnivorous. So yeah, a venomous, even omnivorous animal, I might not buy that so much. But anyway, the tail, like I said about the tail. So many types of geckos, and honestly lots of types of lizards in general, but the group that I'm most familiar with is geckos. But they store fat in their tails, and so that, you know, if they are going through brumation, which is sort of like a lizard and reptile version of hibernation, slightly different in how it works like biomechanically, and with their like physiology, they go through like different chemical processes than like bears do when they hibernate. But whether it's for brumation or whether it's for just like being able to have, you know, food stored up so that if, you know, there's some kind of like weird drought, that you don't starve. As I've sort of mentioned, if you've sort of followed our Pokemon as Pets videos, they, you know, I have a leopard gecko, and her tail's very chunky and has these little knobs all over it. I don't know the purpose of these little knobs, but that's very, very, you know, common in the geckos that do store a lot of fat in their tails, to have these little knobs all over them. So that's probably what it was going off of. Then I also had an interesting thought. I think as I was just like shiny hunting, or maybe just like grinding some golden raspberries in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee in Cerulean Cave, the upper floor, where I think it's the only place that Lickitung spawns. And as I was walking around, I actually had this really interesting thought that he doesn't draw it to look at so much here, but at least the 3D model of the games it sort of did. But its tongue was a lot thicker and doesn't come out as far, and it looked like the tail. It was about the same width and length as like this section of the tail. And I was like, oh, that could be some kind of predator defense to make predators think, okay, this is its head, so I'm going to go after that, or at least confuse it, because it's like, is this its head with the tongue, or is this its head with the tongue? And I hesitate to say most, but many kinds of lizards, if they get grabbed by the tail, they can basically cut off their own tail. Like, they have like a specific weakness in like one of the tail vertebra that they can just like constrict like a specific muscle, and it will just pop off their tail, and they can run away while the predator is distracted with the tail. So interesting little ecological thing there. Then one last nitpick that I slightly have with this is that, like, I get keeping to Lickitung's original art 100%. I understand the decision. No animal is going to have hands like this, where it's like, that's not even a hand. That's literally just like flesh with like a couple bones sticking out. That's not a hand. Those are not fingers. And granted, they could be just very reduced because Lickitung uses its tongue for everything. But because in general, if you don't use a body part, if it's not useful to what it is that you do, generally, evolution just sort of like makes it so those parts are redundant, similar to like why T-Rex has such tiny arms. And even T-Rex didn't even have the tiniest of arms relative to body size. If you're ever in for a laugh, look up Carnotaurus. It's the big theropod dinosaur with like the horns. For an animal that's like, I don't know, 15, 16 feet tall, its whole entire arm was like the length of a human forearm or smaller. So they didn't need it. They didn't use it for anything. So, it's just not cost effective to put like energy and resources into growing arms if you're not going to use them. So potentially I could see that, but it would still have some kind of fingers, not just like the little stubs of like bone or nail right there. Anyway, I've been talking for way too long about Lickitung, at least this one. So let's talk about this one. This one is a much cooler image, I think, because you get to see it actually doing things. These bands look much more bright than they do here. These look like very just like, almost just like a pale eggshell color, whereas these ones look yellow, which I really like. Let's see. Yeah, it just gives it a more dynamic shot. It actually reminded me a lot of, let me find it, this Pokemon card. I remember having this Pokemon card when I was a kid. This is, from the base set, I believe. Or no, it's from Jungle. But of Lickitung just eating some berries and looking so incredibly happy about it. Yeah, that's what this reminded me of, and I'd be surprised if he didn't get some kind of inspiration from that Pokemon card. That would definitely be my guess. Let's see. But yeah, how thin Lickitung's tongue is also bothers me a little bit, because its tongue is definitely not that thin in any of its art. And like, it makes sense, to be functionally that thin, but also I would think that it'd be wider more toward its mouth and sort of taper instead of, it looks like it's definitely wider in its mouth, but it gets thin very quickly. And I don't know just like how the musculature in that would work biologically. Then again, it's Pokemon. Let's see, is there anything else I wanted to say about Lickitung? Not really. I mean, like, the immediate comparison that someone might want to make is to a chameleon, just because of the tongue. But, like, chameleon tongues are so incredibly different. Chameleon tongues basically sit on this extra, like, rod of bone that they have in their mouth. And, the tongue, especially, like, the end of the tongue, isn't just, like, the end of a normal tongue like yours, or your dog's. But yeah, chameleon tongues sort of have like a tube at the end that sort of like folds in on itself, almost if like you had like a sock on your hand and then you punch something, and then the sock comes off and, covers the thing that you just punched, and then you pull your arm back, and now you have a sock with something in it. It's a really bad description. But we're just gonna move on. And part of me really wishes that I didn't have to move on, because now we're here. So, what do I even say about Jinx? Like, Jinx is a weird Pokemon to begin with. And then Joshua gets involved. So, number one, I'm just going to start from the top down, just for simplicity's sake. I don't know what's going on with the hair. My first thought would have been to make Jinx, mammal, but I kind of get the reasoning why he didn't do that. I don't understand the reasoning for reasons I'll talk about. I think it's sort of like cephalopod based, which, cephalopods are the group of animals that includes octopi and squid. For a couple reasons that I'll talk about, I think that's where he's getting some of the inspiration from, but that's not what I would do. So there are many things that people think might be like the inspiration for Jinx, a number of which are, various, Japanese yokai, namely some, I forget the actual name of it, but it's basically some kind of yokai that has, whitish blonde hair, has, sort of icy type powers, dark skin, large lips, Jinx. And also, I think part of its lore is that it wears, a tattered red kimono as well, so, that fits Jinx. A couple of its sprites, as well as, I think in Pokemon Snap, it's, depicted as singing, which some people are like, oh, it could be, a Pokemon version of, the expression, the fat lady. No, it's not over till the fat lady sings. I guess. In general, though, none of them are yeah, it's a cephalopod. So, this hair looks very weird and very unlike... It looks like noodles. It does not look like any other hair that Joshua's ever drawn. And because of that, I don't think it's, hair in the same sense that, mammals have hair. If I went to go to my head, but I don't have any. But it's not... Doesn't look nearly the same as, the hair that mammals would have, or even that I'm trying to think of some of the mammalian Pokemon he's drawn. Pokemon like Chansey, Pokemon like Snorlax, which I don't think we've actually talked about, but we will. But this hair just does not look the same, so I'm inclined to think that this isn't actual hair, which would make sense based on the rest of the physiology of Jinx. But next let's talk about the eyes. So I'm very confused because for something that once again, just coming back to the theme of me not always understanding why Joshua makes the decisions that he makes, because Jinx's eyes, as you can see, right below me, are not so huge, but just this tiny little pupil. At least if I'm remembering Jinx correctly, it's not. So I just looked, and I am mistaken. So Jinx's eyes are just white with just a little black dot in the middle. But something about just its eyes clearly are out from its face. And because there's no, notable indentation for them to be in a bone structure like you would see in a vertebrate, I can't think of a single vertebrate who has eyes that are just out like this. Maybe frogs, I guess. Frogs and salamanders, I guess. Yeah, sort of. But even then, you can, if you were to look at a frog or salamander skull, you can see where the eyes go. On here, there's literally no indication that these are actual eyes. It doesn't even look like it has eyelids. And some things don't. Well, I guess that's not technically true. Even like snakes and some like geckos that keep their eyes like perpetually open. They're not actually open. There is a scale over their eye, like so it's basically their eyes are permanently shut, but their eyelids are see-through. But that's not what I see really going on here. I'm really just confused by the eye, because like you could argue, I guess, that nope, that's not what I want. That like this part is the eyelid, but like that's not what it looks like to me. And now we get into some of like the squid parts, or cephalopod parts. So it looks like, yes, it's got, you know, Jinx's stereotypical lips, but on the inside, so I've never seen anything of Jinx depicting that it has teeth of any kind. But here it looks like it's got something inside its mouth that to me sort of looks like a cephalopod beak, because if you didn't know, cephalopods have beaks that they have, that's basically, you know, their mouth. You know, they don't have, I don't even know what kind of mouth people would normally think they would have, just because, you know, I've dissected, you know, cephalopods before, so like that's just what I know them to have, but I don't really know what else other people would think they'd have. But they have a beak, and that's sort of what it looks like here. Not quite the same as like a cephalopod beak, because here it looks like you've got sort of like a almost fang shape like that in the top part, and then similar here, something sort of like that in the bottom. That's sort of what I see. And then also it's got gills. I don't think you can really see them on this side, but they're definitely right here. Those are definitely gills. We are not going to talk about the boobs. So the hands have, it looks like suckers on them too, and it's not just like he's got these things at the end. If you look, you can sort of see them running up and down the fingers too. Like there's obviously this one here. Looks like there's another one here, maybe another one here, maybe one right here. There's definitely one right here and right here. So yeah, that is sort of giving me cephalopod vibes, even though cephalopods also don't have suction cups like that. They're almost like serrated a little bit. These look more like frog suction cups almost, but just based on that they're going all the way down the fingers like they would like in like an octopus tentacle. That's sort of what that's reminding me of. But there's definitely some here too. Like you can see them running down this finger. You can see this one here. Looks like there's one there. It looks like there's even like ones running across here. So getting major cephalopod vibes from that. And then the dress part. So a lot of squid do have little flappy things on the side of their mantle, which is like their head part, that they sort of flap to swim. That's sort of what those look like. There's even, I think it's called like a Dumbo octopus that also does that, a very deep water octopus, but it's on its like head part. It's got these two, it's called a Dumbo octopus for a reason, you know, like Dumbo the elephant. It's got these two big flaps that it just, you know, sort of flaps, and that's how it swims. That's sort of what those remind me of. And then two. So it looks like there's only 6 of, you know, these sort of points to Jinx's dress. But like the texture doesn't really look like scaly to me, like you would see in something that's like reptilian. It really does look like octopus like skin texture, which is a really loaded thing because octopi can like change the texture of their skin. They're super weird. But that's what it looks like to me. And most octopi have, well, not like sort of like webbed feet, but like webs between each of their tentacles. and in varying species, it varies how far down the tentacle it goes. Some of them barely have one, while others it goes like a significant portion down the tentacle. I could potentially see, each of these 6 points, this one here, here, then presumably there's another one in the back, and then one like in the middle of the back. So those 6 there, and then 2 arms, that's 8. I could potentially see him trying to, characterize, I guess is the right word. Look, characterize or depict Jinx as some kind of really weird octopus. And then the dress part is like that flap of skin that goes between the tentacles. I could kind of see him doing that. In which case, like, I'm very impressed because that is something that I never would have thought of, and that you do really, that Joshua did very subtly, but still that looks really neat. So really, really interesting. I don't want to look at this any longer than I absolutely have to, so we're going to wrap up this video. Once again, thank you to Joshua for even allowing me to make content based on his art. If you want to support Joshua, which you absolutely should, like I said, please go check out all of his links. They will be the links, the first links down in the description. Please, please, please go check them out. Also, make sure to follow me on Twitter as well at Pallet_you to keep up on all things Pokemon science. And if you feel like our content is worthy of supporting financially as well, we do have a Patreon, the link to which will be further down in the description past Joshua's links. A massive, massive thank you, that was really lame, to our current Patreon supporters, Patty Murphy and Sam McCarty. Your support is, as always, incredibly appreciated, and looking forward to seeing both of you hopefully at our stream, which we also do every Saturday at around noon. I almost said Eastern time, but that's my old time zone. Mountain time, so 2 p.m. Eastern time, where we'll be continuing our current playthrough of Pokemon Ranger, which I haven't played in probably close to a decade at this point. So look forward to seeing both of you there, as well as anybody else who happens to be watching. And lastly, thank you so much for watching, and as always, there's a time and place for everything.